Idea to do that today. Okay. Not here, for sure. I mean, I'm sure you did. But you don't look too much like your father. Really?
It's best to
I'll go in the corner door. That's okay, I'll go in the school.
So who serves more?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and Your Excellencies. Very warm welcome to this event. I would like you all to stand, please, while we wait for the President of Malta, Her Excellency Marie-Louise Correa Preca to come into the. Please take, if you could stand up, thank you. Your Excellency, if you'd like to join us on the stage, please, with Dr. Rifai. Thank you very much. Please take a seat. And Isabel, can I invite you as well to join the stage? So, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome again to this event. My name is Daniela Wagner. I'm the Group Business Development Director for Jacobs Media Group, which is Travel Weekly Group in the UK. It gives me enormous pleasure to be here, and I'd like to say a particularly warm welcome to the Honourable Ministers who are with us this evening, Honourable Edmund Bartlett, Jamaica Tourism Minister, Honourable Najib Balala, the Kenya Tourism Minister and Secretary in the Department of Tourism, and the Honourable Priska Mufumira, I'm very sorry for my pronunciation, who is the Zimbabwe Minister of Tourism, and of course Honourable Conrad Mitzi, who is the Minister of Tourism for Malta. And esteemed ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure to have you all here with us on this Friday evening. And we're very excited because this is the launch event of ITIC, which is going to become an annual feature in the calendar of events, both in London and internationally. And it's, for us, part of a very important initiative. ITIC has already created a fabulous board, which is chaired by one of the most well-known personalities worldwide in the tourism industry, Dr. Rifai, who is the chair not only of ITIC, but also the former Secretary General of the World Tourism Organization. It's a great pleasure to have you here with us. And thank you for all the work that you have already put into this initiative. It's much appreciated. And basically, this evening, we're going to have a 1-hour session, which is going to be in 2 very distinct parts. First, we have 2 keynote speeches by wonderful ladies on the stage. And then we will have a short break, and then there will be a panel session which will be all around island investment and what we're doing in the tourism industry. And I would say that basically what we're looking for really is to understand how tourism helps investment in people and local communities. And we're in the middle of really defining that mission statement. But we're here to run on time, and so I would like to introduce a very close friend of mine and very talented lady, Isabel Hill, who is the Director of National Travel and Tourism Office for the United States Department of Commerce. Isabel, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniela, and good afternoon. It is a great pleasure for me to be here at the announcement of the International Tourism and Investment Conference. As we all know, investment is the engine of growth for the travel and tourism sector. Large or small, capital investments are needed in every country to build the infrastructure of enterprises that are the backbone of the travel and tourism sector. The focus on island states is important for the United States, which of course has a number of island states and territories. And the United States, too, has a strong interest in the African continent, with ties that grow and strengthen. And this includes our ties to tourism investment. The United States has invested in the region both through development aid and through private sector investments. The development of the travel and tourism sector depends on the strength of infrastructure as well as the strength of tourism offerings. Connectivity in the Africa region can be a real challenge, as we all know. And to assist with this, the United States Trade and Development Agency signed a grant agreement with Ethiopian Airlines and their partners earlier this year, including ASky from Togo, Malawian Airlines, and Rwandair. And the grant will help provide technical assistance in training in airline management and staff on software, hardware, data analytics, services, and best practices. It will support procurement and implementation of the airline's information solutions, which will ultimately help improve the operational efficiency and profitability of the airlines in Africa. The U.S. travel technology company Sabre will be conducting the training. And this follows an earlier aviation initiative by the U.S. Trade Development Agency in South Africa. And that initiative leveraged the expertise and resources of the private sector, both in the United States and South Africa, to build human capacity and infrastructure to strengthen the aviation sector, upon which the tourism industry is so strongly dependent. Along with better air connectivity is the need to protect habitat and wildlife, both for its intrinsic value and as an asset for tourism. The U.S. Department of the Interior and USAID have partnered in the region, working with countries throughout East Africa with specific initiatives in Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, and Zambia. They have focused on building capacity in non-governmental organizations and government agencies to address wildlife crimes and convene partners to facilitate cooperation. And these are just some of the examples of what the United States government has done to work and strengthen infrastructure and assets on which much of the tourism sector depends. In addition to the private sector engagement in these initiatives, the U.S. companies too have made significant investments in the growth of travel and tourism in the region. The African continent, as we all know, continues to undergo rapid urbanization, and Hilton Worldwide is responding with plans to more than double its hotels in Africa in the next 5 years. mainly striking deals with existing hotels for rebranding, thereby supporting local business owners. The pipeline of new facilities is part of Hilton's Africa growth strategy, which involves an investment of about $50 million. And at the same time, Marriott International announced that it is targeting over 200 hotels with 37,000 rooms open in the pipeline by 2022. This equates to about $8.5 billion of capital investment with their real estate partners, reinforcing its continued commitment to its expansion in Africa. The investment is expected to generate substantial economic activity, around 50,000 direct and indirect jobs once the hotels open. As tourism in emerging destinations increases, another US company, Airbnb, is helping to ensure the growth in healthy and inclusive tourism by being available to communities and populations that traditionally have been unable to benefit from the tourism growth. Airbnb helps these communities with guests helps these communities to offer guests authentic and affordable travel. And today, the Airbnb platform in Africa is empowering far more diverse range of places and people well beyond the typical hotel districts and the traditional hospitality industry to welcome guests, create new opportunities, and establish pathways for economic stability for families. To meet growing traveler demand for unique offerings and kinds of experiences, Airbnb earlier this year launched its experiences offering. These experiences are activities or excursions that are led by passionate locals, highlighting their interests and their perspective, as well as showing unique places that many visitors would otherwise not get to experience. Now, a lot will depend, of course, on the ease of doing business in that region. The World Bank and others have already done a great deal of business in this area. But with 60% of the countries on the way to the frontier economy status, there is no doubt room for improvement, but there are some good examples. Kenya has moved from 136 to 61 in the World Bank Ease of Doing Business Index. Others can learn this lesson. And the conference announced today can explore what impediments there may be to growth that will need to be addressed to capture the value, to maximize the potential of travel and tourism to grow the economy, support jobs, and support sustainability. It can also explore the decisions behind investments that have already been made to see what is working. Today is the right time to launch this conversation. A conversation about how to create an environment that supports investments in travel and tourism for the benefit of people and profit. And we look forward to being part of it. Thank you.
Now I will invite Dr. Rifai to join us on stage to say a few words about ITIC. Thank you, Dr. Rifai.
Madam President, it's a great honor to have you with us. You're truly, truly a wonderful human being. That's what distinguishes you best. This lady, for you that don't know her, is such a warm, giving lady, unlike any other you have met. She just happens to be a president of a country, a wonderful country as well. We were in her hospitality 3 days ago. I cannot imagine, I cannot stop thinking of how kind, how gracious she was. Malta is a rock, is a yellow rock that rose from the bottom of the earth into the sea, rose its face to show to the world strength and the beauty of smallness. Malta is connected underground, under the sea, connects Europe to Africa, connects east to west. Malta is a place you have to go to. It's just an example of how small is not only beautiful, small can be powerful, and it is. It's a model that can be used for so many other things. I'm a bit emotional about this, but I really mean it. And I think only a country like this can produce a president like this. She's one of the few presidents in the world. If you can call on a cell phone, and she answers her phone, believe me. When I told her you're one of the few presidents I know that does this, she said, we have to be practical, we have to be down to earth. And that's what she is. So it's a great, great pleasure and a great honor to have you with us, Madam President. Thank you so much. She chairs the Mediterranean Tourism Foundation. That's why she hosted us in her presidential palace 3 days ago. Mr. Bartlett, Ibrahim, and myself. Now, in a 3 hours meeting that she dedicated so generously her time to, she's used one word, and I'm going to build on that word and try to share with you some of the thoughts I'm thinking of today. She said we must have synergies. Now, how did that all start? Ibrahim came to me less than a year ago and said, I want to do something on investment in Africa. I said, yes, but there is a special situation. He's from Mauritius, of course, regarding small islands. He said, okay, Africa and small islands. Then we started to carry this thing through. He brought in one of the best people that I know, one of the best ministers, Minister Balala, and from Kenya. Then he brought in Jared Lawless. He brought in Anita, and Daniela. He brought in Susanna, Professor Bowler. And we formed together a very good team that we together started to think of how to develop this idea further. How is this connected to Malta and the meeting of the Mediterranean? 3 days ago, Minister Bartlett, who I'm also helping in trying to put together something called Global Tourism Resilience Center. Starts in the Caribbean, in Jamaica, his good home country. Asked me to try and contact the president from Malta to see if she could be a patron and a shepherd for this initiative, his initiative. When I called her, she said, you just come. That's her. So I told Ibrahim, I'm going to Malta. He said, I'll come with you. We've extended an invitation to her to come to grace this event. So the 3 of us went there. And when she started to talk about synergy, the only thing that came to my mind is how petty some of us can be if we want to work alone. We cannot work alone. We tried to find some connections between our initiatives. We found powerful connections, and she was there patiently, diligently, step by step, guiding us through that. So Minister Bartlett, Ibrahim, and Andrew, the good Secretary General of the Foundation, found so many things in common. All 3 of them are here, and today we're going to enlarge this partnership to include much more than that. That's what I want to talk about today. I want to talk about how we need to work together. There's no other way in achieving anything. We have to descend, we have to turn our backs to our egos. We can never, ever achieve something as a Mediterranean Foundation alone, or ITIC alone, or the Center alone. All of us knew this, all of us recognized this right from the very beginning. But we can find synergies. Ibrahim can do conferences for Bartlett. Bartlett can extend his concept to include the Mediterranean. The Mediterranean Foundation is extending now to West Africa, where Ghana is doing something, and so on and so forth. That's how our industry can become something. Why is investment important in our industry, tourism? Because it's investing in our future. You know, tourism today is not just a very powerful, prosperly flourishing sector, representing 10.2% of world GDP and 1 out of every 10 jobs. It's by far much more than that. It's touching people's lives, connecting people together. One of the most important deficiencies we have in the world today is the deficiency of tolerance and understanding, bringing people together. It's by far much more powerful, much more effective than all the other shortcomings and deficiencies. There's nothing more important, nothing more effective than people traveling, rubbing shoulders, meeting each other to deal with this deficiency. When you visit a place, when you have dinner with people, hear their stories, taste their food, listen to their music. You can never ever have feelings of resentment or hatred towards these people. Breaks down barriers like anything in the world. That's what the president believed in, because she is championing the cause of tourism for peace and tourism for sustainability. So tourism is about sustaining life on earth. That's what sustainability is all about. It's about livelihood of people. Investing in that is investing in our future. But today, we had a very good meeting of the board before we came to this meeting today. And we talked about what kind of investments are we talking about. What Isabel Hill ended her speech with was a very important statement. It's really all about people. At the end of the day, if we don't turn tourism into a force for good for people, it doesn't really matter. I don't care about tourism. I care about what it does to people. That's what really matters at the end of the day. Investment to me is not just a business. It's what it does to people and to the community. I'm going to take 1 or 2 minutes more just to share with you a small story that I shared with the people at the board today. I was in the good islands of the Philippines last summer. There was a wonderful lady minister that wanted to take me to an island to show me a good project there. The only way to go there was by helicopter. We took that helicopter and we landed in that island. The owner of that project was waiting for us. When I landed there, I realized that when he told me that he bought the whole island to be able to control the investment in a good way. The project was impressive. It was like Disneyland for adults. We had a hotel built in Italian style, hotel built in Chinese style, hotel built in Japanese style, Mexican style, restaurants. It's a big, big compound. Having the whole island was a responsibility. What they did not tell me at the time is that there were 90,000 people living on that island. So my second question was to the owner in front of the minister. How is your relationship with the local community? He said, oh, don't worry. I'm like a father to them. I take care of them. All the workers from this hotel are from that community. I open schools for them. I open clinics for them. I do anything that is necessary. So when I asked him, can I go visit that community? He hesitated a little bit. He didn't want me to go. Then, of course, he had to arrange for my visit. I went there, I spent a couple of hours, I came back. He said, oh, what's your impression? I said, you're right. People are so grateful, so appreciative to what you're doing. But, there's a big but there. He said, what? I told him, I'm personally not sure that the children and the grandchildren of the people there are going to be happy to spend the rest of their lives just serving rich people in your compound and then going back to their homes, realizing how much difference there is in the economic standards. He said, so what do you mean? I'm not doing a good job? I said, no, you are doing a good job. You have to think of the future. That's exactly what the kind of investments that we're looking for. We're looking for investments that would share the business, not just share the capital or the profits. We're not looking for charity. We're looking for businesses that understand that when you are in a compound like this, you need to send your clients, encourage them to go to that community. Let the people in that community create their own jobs. Let the people there spend their money. When they spend money in that village, people there are going to open shops, open restaurants, open cafes. They create their own jobs. Their imagination, their ingenuity will come out of all of this. That's the only way this investment can be sustained. Because every visitor to that compound will be seen as a business potential to the community. The community will protect your investment, not hate it. And in developing countries, in Africa, this is a very important issue. I'm saying this story because it exemplifies what we think of proper tourism and how tourism should be. We have to move from the concept of sharing profits and sharing capital from corporate social responsibility to sharing business. We need to connect better with the community. We need to be people-centered. Without this, our investment is not worthwhile. The investment itself is not sustainable. And that's very, very important. I wanted to share some of these thoughts with you, and I want to say that we have to work together to do that. Without working together, can't make it. This wonderful lady that's with us, Marie-Louise, that's how she likes to be called always. The President of Malta is the one that taught me that lesson when she used the word, let's look for synergies. So please, wherever you come from, whatever you're representing, let's look for synergies, work together. Come to Ibrahim, come to me, come to any one of the board members and tell us how we can work together, what's in common between us. That's my message to you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Madam President, for gracing our event again. Thank you so much. Thank you.
And now it's my enormous honour and pleasure to invite Madam President to come to the stage. Thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Honourable Ministers, Excellencies, distinguished guests, dear friends. Well, I would like to start by commending the work of the ITIC Advisory Board, and in particular its chair, even though I was I was going down into the seat. I was so embarrassed, and well, my friend, His Excellency, Dr. Talib Rifai and Mr. Ibrahim Ayub and your team for bringing us together for this important conference. Dr. Rifai, your presence and your endeavors for the organization of this important conference gives us the assurance of success. Your experience as former Secretary General of the UNWTO will undoubtedly provide inspiring leadership. I am convinced that this important conference will be an opportunity for us to share our experience and expertise regarding the urgent need for the development of sustainable tourism. In today's world, tourism has become a way of life. I believe that the powerful potential of the tourism sector is a unique catalyst for the benefit of our entire human family. Tourism is definitely a motivator for sustainable development that can help us achieve inclusive prosperity and peace. Indicators from the World Economic Forum makes it clear that tourism and the hospitality industry can boost the competitiveness of national economies in a massive way and can enhance economic opportunities for the benefit of our peoples. A recent report published by Harvard University also states that tourism can create an ideal context for communities to work with governments. Let me take Malta as an example of how political will and community action have come together. In Malta, we have built our brand on the identity and characteristics of our nation, our diversity, our Euro-Mediterranean heritage, and the focus on good hospitality. In this way, we are providing an authentic experience to our visitors. The impressive increase in visitors to Malta is evidence that tourists today are seeking the enriching experience of knowing and understanding the country that they visit. According to the latest indicators for Malta, from World Travel and Tourism Council, the tourism sector represents 11.2% of total investment in the Maltese economy and 28.3% of total employment. Moreover, it contributes to 27.1% to the GDP, and it is being projected to increase to 33% by 2028. Even though Malta is experiencing this impressive growth in the tourism sector, we are not sitting on our laurels. So much so, we are continuing to enhance the touristic product and our island's connectivity, to mention a few examples. There should be a strategy, policy, and a plan of action for the development of sustainable tourism. In fact, Malta has a thorough tourism policy, which is being implemented. However, I will leave the presentation of more details of this policy to my dear friend, Minister of Tourism, the Honorable Dr. Konrad Mizzi. He is very capable to do that, I'm sure. From my experience, from my own country, I am even more convinced that tourism is the industry that can bring prosperity to our communities in the most direct and immediate of ways. Policies in the tourism sector must also respond to the grassroots realities of our communities. This is a way to ensure that we manage to find the right balance and to address the increasing pressure of over-tourism. Sustainable tourism is the only way forward. This can be achieved by working in synergy and also keep at the heart of our investment our commitment to sustainable development. I believe that the United Nations Agenda 2030 is the perfect roadmap for us to achieve this objective. All of our countries and all of the stakeholders in the tourism sector are responsible to effectively implement the mandate of Agenda 2030. SDG number 8, Target 9, focuses specifically on the importance of sustainable economies and tourism, while SDG number 14 and 15 focus on the sustainable future of our oceans and landmass, respectively. We must also keep environmental well-being of our ecosystems at the heart of our endeavors, because as we all know, the disruptions caused by climate change will only increase in the future. As the honorary co-chair of the newly established Global Tourism Resilience and Crisis Management Center, let me take this opportunity to encourage all of you to join in our work to implement practical policies to address and to mitigate the challenges caused by climate change. The issue of climate change must stimulate the tourism sector to be innovative, to adopt good practices that increase environmental protection, and to safeguard the natural heritage of our countries. Let me quote from a report published last year by the International Center for Agriculture and Biosciences, entitled The Potential of the Blue Economy in Tourism. The report states that sustainable tourism can be a central contributor to the blue economy by promoting conservation and the sustainable management of marine environments. Tourism is therefore a critical component in our strategies to preserve healthy and sustainable life on this planet, while also investing in strategies for innovation in the blue and green economy. As we all know, environmental consciousness among consumers is rising. Certainly, this will increasingly be reflected in the choices that are being made by tourists and visitors to all of our countries. The Green Economy Report, published by the United Nations Environment Programme and the UNWTO, emphasizes that further investment is required to keep us on track to transform tourism into a greener industry. I believe that a long-term investment in the sustainable future of our planet and the diversity of its ecosystems must be a motivator for all of our national and international endeavors in this sector. It is for this reason that I am so proud that earlier this year, my country took on board the White Flag International Commitment to free our beaches and sea from plastics. On a regional level, I'm also very proud to say that the Mediterranean Tourism Foundation is also endeavoring within the Euro-Mediterranean region to further develop the tourism sector in a sustainable manner, and its CEO is over here, Andrew. In fact, one of its groundbreaking initiatives is an app developed with the support of the Maltese government to measure energy consumption within the hospitality industry. This app has been developed to address two main objectives. Firstly, the high cost of energy expenditure in the hospitality industry, and secondly, most importantly, to contribute towards the reduction of CO2 emissions. This is clear evidence of the effectiveness that can be achieved when the tourism sector and governments work together. Such synergy will definitely lead to significant benefits for both the national and international economy, while also addressing the effects of climate change. Furthermore, tourism has the ability to create positive multiplier effects. This means that a well-planned strategy for tourism, with the necessary investment and partnerships between our authorities and private sector, can cascade down to communities. Such a cascading effect will also definitely address issues of poverty and social exclusion. Research by the Overseas Development Institute, based in the United Kingdom, explains that investment and growth of the national economy depends upon a number of factors, such as the empowerment of women and a conducive environment for entrepreneurship and enterprise. Regarding the status of women, evidence shows us that by investing in sustainable tourism strategies, we are also investing in the dignity of women. According to data from the UNWTO, women are more likely to have a leadership role in tourism businesses, associations, and tourism governance. Looking at the sector in a holistic way, we can see that travel, tourism, and hospitality are already supporting 1 in every 10 jobs on the planet. With the right regulatory conditions and political will, the World Travel and Tourism Council Economic Impact Report for 2018 states that travel and tourism generates 10.4% of global GDP and 9.9% of total global employment. The sector's direct growth of 4.6% is outpacing the global economy for the 7th successive year. Moreover, a cross-country study by the International Monetary Fund has shown that there is a direct link between tourism development and economic growth. For this reason, governments, particularly in lower-income economies, should view investing in its tourism industry as a means to stimulate growth over the long run. As we know, tourism is one of the only industries in the world where services and goods are consumed at the place where they are produced. For this reason, local communities are both at an advantage to reap the benefits associated with the sector. A well-planned, regulated, and responsible tourism sector can be an excellent mechanism of channeling resources in a more equitable way for the benefit of all of our communities. This is why a sustainable and responsible investment in tourism is a powerful potential contributor to achieve the goals of social solidarity and to put into action the principles of social justice. And yes, communities do not need charity, but sustainable investment. I would like to emphasize that an investment in sustainable tourism development does not only protect the environment or boost the economy, it also is a catalyst to bring people together in respect towards diverse cultures. We all know that tourism does not only lead to economic growth and job opportunities, it is also an effective gateway for building sustainable and meaningful friendships, which have the long-term potential to create peace and prosperity. Undoubtedly, tourism is a gateway for global cultural diplomacy by reminding us of the most fundamental values of respect and harmony which underpin our very humanity. On concluding, I must say that I am so proud that a strategic partnership will soon be announced among the International Tourism and Investment Conference, the Global Tourism Resilience and Crisis Management Center, and the Mediterranean Tourism Foundation. This is a practical example of how we can work together to build sustainable tourism across regions and across the globe. I truly believe that sustainable tourism is our way forward to ensure the much-needed peaceful coexistence and inclusive prosperity for our entire human family. Thank you.
Madam President, thank you so much for sharing your vision with us and your passion. It's been a fantastic keynote address. Thank you, Isabel. Thank you, Dr. Rifai. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd just like you to ask you to stay in your seats for a couple of moments. We're just going to change the stage setting now for the panel session, which will follow immediately. And yes, right, please come ahead. And it is my enormous pleasure now to introduce the lady who is going, lots of ladies on stage this evening, which is always a good thing. My friend and colleague, Anita Menderata, who is the founder of Passion Consulting and also an advisor to all the most important organizations in the world and a member of the CNN task force. Anita will now moderate the panel session that's going to follow. Anita, please come and join me on stage. Thank you.
Your Excellency, Marie-Louise Caliero-Preco, the beautiful President of Malta, thank you for being with us today and adding an enormous amount of gravitas, excellence, and great style to our stage. We are very grateful for your presence and your confidence. Dr. Talal Rifai, Chairman of the International Tourism Investment Conference. I had to say, I had to laugh, Daniela, I love you dearly, but the tourism community is exceptional in creating acronyms. So as soon as you went on stage and you called out ITIC, and I thought, goodness, there we go again. But Your Excellency, Dr. Rifai, we are delighted to have you here as the CITICC. Thank you very much for being the chairman and for being the global guardian angel of the tourism community. The Honorable Conrad Mizzi, the Minister of Tourism of Malta, thank you very much for joining us, sir. Honorable Minister of Tourism and Wildlife, Najib Balala from Kenya, my dear neighbor and dear friend. Another dear friend, Honorable Edmund Bartlett, Minister of Tourism of Jamaica, sir. Gerald Willis, a very, very dear friend of the global tourism community, former chairman of the WTTC, another great acronym in our community, and also a WTTCA, a WTTC ambassador. Esteemed leaders from across the international community, and both in tourism and investment, dear guests, ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed. A very warm welcome to this interactive panel discussion. We're now going to shift gears. We've got the working chairs on the stage itself. A warm thank you to Daniela for opening up the stage and creating the launch event of what is going to be an international tourism conference that is going to change the dynamic. Now, I have my script. I have my official script. I have my microphone. I promise not to go into intellectual karaoke. We've got a great team at the back. I have a confession to make. We started this event when we started the conversations, and Ibrahim and Dr. Rifai started talking about what we were trying to achieve. Now, all of us here are preparing ourselves for World Travel Market. It is the annual pilgrimage of travel professionals. We all come together and we have our suits all dry cleaned, our speeches are ready, our jewels are polished. The ladies have the little tricks in their shoes to make sure that their feet don't stop feeling anything at 3 in the afternoon. But the fact remains, the danger of this week is as much as it brings together 55,000 people from across the tourism world, it tends to be a variation on a theme. It tends to be the same conversations around the same subjects and effectively living what we say. We are absolutely a green industry. We believe in sustainability because the opposition to sustainability is, quite honestly, us disappearing. The danger, though, however, is that as we recycle as an industry, we tend to recycle the same themes. We tend to recycle the same conversations. And that doesn't help us. So when the idea came together of having the Tourism and Investment Conference, it was actually a matter of saying, we need to shift the conversation from talking again about tourism and the need for investment to actually talking about investment and why it needs tourism. And that was the unique proposition of this conference. And that's what we really felt. And as an advisory board, we kept challenging each other to say, how is this different? How is this going to shift the needle on how we talk about tourism? The only way we're going to do that is to stop talking about it politically and start talking about it as business leaders. We need to make the business case for tourism. And Madam, you spoke perfectly, and it was interesting how, as much as you're in the political space as beautiful President of Malta, everything you said was exactly right around the business case. It's about Agenda 2030. It's about sustainability. It's about shifting the metrics and talking about what is our industry doing about communities? What difference are we making? And how do we now define ROI? We have a very dear friend from Costa Rica who's here, Hermes, and that's one destination that has always been talking about sustainability from the birth of the destination. It's not a strategy, it's part of the DNA. In Malta, you've positioned yourself as a country that has really taken to heart the need to differentiate as a business case in a very challenging and competitive region in the world, and you've done it beautifully. Because ultimately, business is about choice, and we need to make the right choices to make sure that we can bring in investors to support destinations like Kenya, like Jamaica. The Honourable Minister Balala is to me one of the bravest people in our industry, because he's prepared to take the stage, as he did a month and a half ago when we shared the stage in Cape Town at the Airbnb Travel Summit. And you said things, sir, that I thought were going to get you fired. So I'm delighted that you're here. You're still employed. Because you made a very great statement about the fact that tourism in Africa has to stop being lazy and stop depending on safari and depending on the big five, and actually appreciate what we have to offer. Because if we don't, we have no business case. And if we don't have a business case, we have no investment. So I am thrilled to be able to welcome to the stage a number of speakers that have been carefully identified by this event to give you a bit of an appetizer on why this conference is going to be different, why we are shifting the needle, and why we are shifting the perspective to not being about tourism and investment, but the investment case for tourism. Before I do so, however, I'm going to give the stage to a very dear friend who is absolutely at the heart of the business case of Malta as a destination. The Honourable Minister of Tourism of Malta, sir, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Anita. Excellency, Madam President, Dr. Rifai, ministers, colleagues, I am truly delighted to be here today. And I was asked by Anita to actually talk about the Malta story. A story which, in all honesty, is still a story in the making. Back in 2012 and 2011, I was part of a team, together with Madam President at the time, in opposition, where we were actually talking about defining a strategy and a vision for the island. A vision which would benefit the population of Malta and which would result in a transformation of the island, whereby we'd bring about prosperity and a better quality of life in terms of quality of the air that we breathe, affordability, education, healthcare, and obviously family. At the heart of all of that was tourism. And I think it is truly interesting that we are actually positioning tourism as an enabler for investment, not only in the sector itself, through hotels, leisure destinations, and so on, but also as an enabler to the wider economy. And I think this is something which is truly interesting. I started off not as Minister of Tourism, I started off as Minister for Energy, with a daunting task to shift the island from fuel oil to natural gas and renewables. And we started off with a very high electricity tariffs. And at the time, back in 2013, it was our main political team going into the elections. And essentially, we did deliver that. We've shifted to gas, brought in investment in the energy sector, and as a result, created better quality of air. In parallel with that, we also reduced energy tariffs, which at the time were stifling investment. And it's quite interesting to know that, tourism operators, especially hotels, were large consumers of energy. And obviously, one of the key drivers and catalysts for change was the Malta Hotels and Restaurants Association, which were constantly telling us, reduce tariffs, it's an inhibitor to change. We cannot invest. Rather than invest in refurbishments and new attractions, we're paying utility companies high tariffs, which are not comparable to tariffs across Europe. And we started off with that vision, and we did manage to unleash an economic revolution at the time. The Prime Minister at the time was very keen as well to develop tourism as an enabler for investment across multiple sectors. At the time, our numbers in tourism back in 2012 were approximately 1.5 million visitors to the island. If we look at the numbers today, We achieved the same numbers in the first 5 months of 1 year. And we now are close to attracting 3 million visitors to the island and another 800,000 who come through cruise liners, which is a completely different business, but they don't stay overnight. In doing so, we created an awareness about Malta, a vibe about the country. And there were a number of key building stones or rather foundations which were critical. And they were critical for the tourism sector, but they were also critical for business and investment in Malta, to create an interest in Malta. The first one was route development. For attracting tourists to the island, for attracting business and investments to the island needed to be connected. We worked very closely with low-cost carriers, the likes of Ryanair, the likes of Wizz, the likes of EasyJet. We worked with the traditional carriers, the BAs of the Swell, the Alitalias, the Swiss, the Emirates, Qatar Airways more recently, and other countries, as well as our own Air Malta. And essentially now Malta is connected to around 110 destinations through direct routes. That created the right environment not only to attract tourists, which were required to fill the planes, but also to create an interest by the business community to come to Malta. And that also created, if you like, an interest by young people to come to visit Malta. That is the reason why we had a surge in investment, for example, in our gaming industry, in cryptocurrencies, in blockchain, and more recently in artificial intelligence. Because essentially, through tourism, we managed to create a vibe where people wanted to come to the island and live on the island as well. So we are trying to marry, if you like, the tourism sector with the local economy and the local residents, as well as foreign businessmen who actually come to the island. It is quite interesting that obviously a lot of the demographic that we were trying to attract at the time were young people. So we started off by trying to create events for young people to make them come to the island. Initially, we had an anchor event in summer, which was the Isle of MTV, which was broadcast across 33 channels, across the EMEA region, and that put us on the map. But we built further events. We created a partnership with Radio 1 here, with the BBC, Radio Italia more recently, and various other initiatives. We try to create events which are cool for families, and this year we're launching a Nickelodeon week, for example, in Easter, and initiatives which attract and are related to culture, such as Valletta 18, which is the city of culture this year, and other initiatives that ensure that people coming to Malta had things to do, not only tourists, but also locals, as well as the broader business economy. We were also very keen to create a product which is attractive, and we are halfway through the journey. We invested significantly in our capital city, which is Valletta. We have refurbished the entrance into the city. We have a wonderful new square. We have managed to attract companies to relocate to Valletta, which was a dead city at night, and now it's a city full of life. It's an open-air theater, museum full of music, as well as financial services companies and companies from all over the world, which are coming to the city, filling it up with life. And together with that, we also try to ensure that Valletta is also rehabilitated in a way where residents also benefit from this regeneration. We managed to secure European Union funds for the regeneration of Valletta. And part of the reason why we secured the funds was that we committed to create open spaces for residents, redevelop and refurbish social housing in Valletta, and also create assisted living for senior citizens in Valletta who wanted to still live independently in their own town. All those initiatives are ensuring that while numbers grow, we will ensure that there isn't a backlash by the local community against tourism. We're ensuring that the wealth is distributed across the patch. And we're also trying to make sure that the tourism numbers are spread across the 12-month season. And to do that, you essentially need routes which are open throughout the year. We're currently working really hard to create and diversify the economy of Malta. Initially, we started off becoming an independent state in '64 and later a republic, and we started off being a naval base for the British services. When we decided to go our own way, there were people who were scared that, without support from the British forces, we wouldn't be able to act independently. We had no resources, no oil and gas, just the resources of our people. But essentially, a few decades down the line, we initially created a manufacturing sector, which is still growing. We print US dollars, Ukraine currency in Belarus and passports. We make pharmaceutical products for Europe. We produce essentially equipment for mobile telephony and electronics. We have a very diversified industry. In addition to that, we started off creating the tourism sector, which created an environment where more investment comes because people enjoyed coming to the islands. We also created the maritime sector, which is now important, whether it's the ship registry or the Malta Freeports operated by CMA CGM, or the yachting industry and other parts of the sector, the financial services sector, the gaming sector, as well as new sectors such as medicine, medical tourism, and education, which are critical for our development. Our next step forward is a focus on technology. We're very keen to be one of the first countries to regulate artificial intelligence in the future, together with blockchain technology. And we believe that by creating an environment which is attractive to investment, we can get the best brains and the best entrepreneurs from all over the world. We do incentivize people to come to Malta, whether they come to produce a movie in Malta, or whether they come to set up an operation in Malta for manufacturing, or essentially a shipping line, or whatever services they're offering. And that is critical, and our tax incentives are important. But in so doing, we are also creating an economy which is strong, an economy which is not based on austerity, but is based on growth. And that growth is essentially then distributed to the people through improved initiatives. We're not there yet, we're a story in the making, but we hope that, when you look at our economic growth, which is close to 6% this year on year, and the fact that we don't have a deficit anymore, and we have, for a successive year, a surplus, is a positive dimension going forward. I am truly honored to form part of the government of Madam President. Madam President is an amazing inspirational figure in Malta, one of the most hardworking presidents that we ever had. I had the honor of working with her as a minister, and I'm sure that we're all lucky that she will be co-chairing the new Resilience Center and that she will be involved in the ITIC. Thank you so much. Thank you for having us.
Honourable Minister, thank you very much. I must say, as someone who's had the blessing of working with business and government for the last several years, I love when I see heads of state making wise choices when it comes to cabinet. So for instance, in Kenya, the fact that His Excellency President Kenyatta combined Ministry of Tourism and Wildlife. And Madam, you clearly knew the scale of the job when you had to take the Minister of Energy with all of his energy and put him into tourism. So great choice in that regard. It was a very smart thing to do. Clearly the energy supplies were quite high under your mind. So, we're now going to get into the conversation. And it is my pleasure to welcome to the stage a number of, as I said, carefully selected speakers who are going to help make the business case, not just for tourism, but make the business case for this conference and why it is now such an important new addition to the international calendar of tourism events itself. Please may I ask to the stage, Madam, Her Excellency, the President of Malta. If you would please join us back on stage. As you wish. Lovely. Please may I ask as well to join on stage my dear friend, Honourable Minister of Tourism and Wildlife of Kenya, Mr. Najib Balala. Also joining, we have my dear friend, Mr. Gerald Lawless, the WTTC and Honourable Minister of Tourism of Jamaica, Mr. Eamon Bartlett. And there he is. I'm also very excited to welcome to the stage a gentleman who's going to be, as I call him, my truth commission, and he's briefed for this. It's Mr. Salah Syed, the Managing Director of Kitty Royale, the promoter of tourism in Zanzibar. Thank you very much. So, I'm not quite sure whether the principle of the rose amongst the thorns horns. I'm not sure how to position this. I'll leave it to you gentlemen to decide. Excellent. I would like us to have a conversation, and if any point, if anyone wants to add any questions, please do, because this is a conversation and really looking at, again, shifting the needle. So for the next, let me say, 20 minutes, we're gonna have a conversation. And as I've spoken to each of you individually, we need to understand how we as an industry need to change to be able to put forward the strong case for investment in tourism. Honourable Minister, Your Excellency, the President of Malta, Madam, please may I ask you, when you speak, when your Honourable Minister of Tourism speaks, you speak almost as if you see tourism with your eyes shut. Because it's so easy to get seduced by the images of tourism and all of the adjectives. How has Malta been able to create the business case and balance it within the other economic priorities of Malta itself?
First of all, thank you very much. Minister Litsi has explained very well that tourism wasn't just a lone focus, but it was a holistic and strategic approach to investment and, well, investment in tourism. It wasn't just simply looking at tourism on its own, but looking at tourism within this whole plan, this whole strategy. And even if you look at tourism on its own, you need so many dimensions to set it off the ground, like investing in the product, which means quite a lot. That is investing in your historical heritage, natural heritage, infrastructure, well, and the whole range of whatever could make the product, the hospitality industry, etc. But with the case of Malta, it wasn't simply looking at the product and putting and enhancing the product. We looked at the whole island as the whole product for tourism in terms of attracting businesses. Connectivity, for example, an island state is so very important to have connectivity. It is really strategic, not only for the locals, but also to explore and expand your tourism potential. So that was very, very important on its own, not just for tourism, but also for our business community and the community, the potential business communities that actually were interested in Malta. Again, then there was the issue of the energy, which was really, and one could say a do-or-die thing. Conrad, I think I'm really explaining it in the right way. We were, our energy production was through fossil fuels, the hard sort of fuels, and thanks to Conrad and his very hard work, I can tell you here, works very hard and really was very apt of being energy minister because he's full of energy and he doesn't stop working. We're now into a much better use of gas to produce our energy. But besides that, also we have been investing in alternative energy. So this was very important, and it's still very, very important to have the right quality of it. Because you cannot attract tourists coming to an island with the worst possible quality of air. For the locals, first and foremost, for our people, but also for tourists themselves. We're investing in the environmental sustainability of the island. So all this, taking into consideration that we looked at tourism within the whole strategic plan to one could say convert Malta into an exciting island where people are, to give the proper visibility, where people are interested to invest, not just in certain aspects or sectors of our economy, but also then in tourism was very important for us. So it wasn't just taking, and this is the This is the whole issue, or rather the fundamental, a very important fundamental for the sustainable development and tourism, to look at the holistic, rather have a holistic approach to it.
And Madam, that's such an important point, and it links to something that Dr. Rifai emphasized when he spoke about you, as you said, the concept of synergies, exactly.
Yes.
And the fact that you were recognizing not just synergies between the sectors, but the synergies between the investments.
Yes.
That it might not feel like a tourism investment, but it mobilizes the entire tourism economy per se, which is a really important point.
If you permit me a bit on this, because when we speak of investment, we have also to consider the different aspects of investment. And what has been going on in Malta is, and Minister Mitzi has mentioned, is that this synergy expanded not just to the usual tourism stakeholders, tourism stakeholders or the sector, but also to communities. For example, with the organization of a whole range of events in Malta. Each and every weekend you have a number of events happening in communities where really tourists and even people living in Malta, residents and citizens, can attend to. So this is also part of the whole synergy. So it's the government, the authorities with the political will, because you need to have political will on this, then the private sector, but also the people themselves through the communities.
And you said it when you started speaking, that quality of life was part of the vision of how you wanted to utilize tourism, which is so important. I'm going to shift now to Honourable Minister Bilal, because similarly in Kenya, you've been quite adamant in equating, for instance, the value of wildlife as part of the tourism proposition, when you had especially the ivory burn, and you did the equation of the value of an elephant alive versus for its tusks. How have you been able to, or forgive me, let me rephrase, when you started looking at tourism in an economic perspective, how were you able to shift the industry to look at it differently and to stop looking at it, again, with its eyes open and all the adjectives, all of the imagery? How were you able to make the case, please?
Well, thank you very much, Madam President. Very inspiring case study of Malta. I haven't been there, but I will definitely come there very soon. Minister, thank you very much. Very good presentation. And I agree with you. You don't change the product from just the tourism perspective. You change the product from the destination perspective. And that is what Malta has done very well. For Kenya, we are, the image, particularly Kenya and East Africa or Africa, the image is about safari. It's about this out of Africa. It's about the hangover of colonialism. That's the image. And we are struggling to change that image. It's not just about safari. It's beyond, because Africa is not one country. Africa is 54 countries. How do we diversify our products? There are beautiful beaches in Cape Verde. There are beautiful beaches in Zanzibar. There are beautiful beaches in Mombasa and beautiful safari, both in Botswana, in Masai Mara, in Kruger National Park. But nobody is looking at it. I think we are still, as investors, that's why the growth of tourism has not happened. Because out of the 1.3 billion people traveling, only 62 million travel to Africa. So that number is negligible in comparison to the potential of a destination that is very broad and diverse. In fact, I'm not even going to talk about tourism, and I agree with Talib Rifai. I don't care about tourism. I'm caring about tourism because it changes lives. It has changed the people of Zanzibar. It has changed the people in Kenya. Yeah? Because we have the potential of doing it. I'll give you an example, Anita. Africa is a rising star now, and it's a continent that is on the rise with 1.3 billion people population. 40% are between 18 and 35. 79% is between 0 and 35. It's a huge number, 79% of the population between 0 to 35. The potential. Where do we invest? And Talib Rifai made it very clear, and Elizabeth made it very clear. We are not just going to invest into just hotels for the sake of hotels. invest because it creates wealth, it creates people, it creates opportunities. Because we cannot have 5-star hotels in 3-star communities. This will not be sustainable. That's why we need to invest in education. We need to invest in security. We need to invest in infrastructure. Then all that will create a roadmap and a path where tourism will flourish. In Africa and the world over, 10% of the GDP is tourism. In Africa, some countries, is even higher. Yeah, you're saying going to be 33% 2028. Yeah, that is beautiful. But how do we make it sustainable? How do we bring connectivity like what has happened in Malta? We do. In Africa, we have a problem of connectivity. How do we connect? Because if you just go for a half-an-hour flight, it costs you $500. And we've just launched last week, actually this week, we launched Nairobi, New York at $600. We are having dinner in Nairobi, breakfast in New York at $600. And from one city to another in Africa, it's $500 half-an-hour flight. So it's not realistic. So we need to come together, build the synergy as what the president says. How do we come together and build this big destination called the continent? And I'm privileged to be part of the ITIC. Again, how do we change the narrative for the continent of Africa? But how do we convert investment, not only just to build hotels? Today, people do not come just to sleep in rooms. People come to get the experience and connect with the people. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. You can always thank the Honourable Minister of Malala for, as they say, cutting straight to the chase. We thank you for that. And you make a really interesting point as well, sir, that I had the blessing of being on stage with President Ramaphosa's investment conference last week. Tourism is also one of the only industries that is an absolute driver of youth employment. So we look at that need at a social level, that's critical. I'm going to shift now to Gerald. And I'd like to ask you, sir, if you have, sorry, you were thinking I was going to segue off to our Honourable Minister. The point of continuous investment and not being lazy about a destination. Your second home of Dubai is quite remarkable in that regard, in that as it's created itself as a unique destination, it's constantly reinventing itself. How has it been able to be so successful and continue to, political structure aside, keep mobilizing that investment attraction? Please.
Well, it's very interesting to listen to Minister Malala talking about what we need to do to continue to develop tourism in Africa. And of course, I think I first came to Dubai, and we were talking earlier in August of 1978, and thought it'd be nice to go to the beach for the afternoon. When we realized it was 48 degrees Celsius and about 85% humidity. But, you know, and then there was very little there. There was very little talk about tourism. And nobody would really even consider a place like Dubai. And you've touched, Minister, very much on the areas, and also Her Excellency the President, on you know, what are the factors that really make it happen. The factors such as the state understanding it has to facilitate connectivity. It doesn't necessarily have to buy the airline or have the airline, but we have always talk in our industry about open skies. And yet we look about and worry about what might happen with Brexit in this part of the world. Will we still have open skies? This just shouldn't be under threat. We have talked for so many years in the industry. Why do governments continue having to consider airlines as anything to do with governments? They are businesses. And if an airline actually achieves all the safety standards and all the other standards rightly applied by governments and by regulation, and if they want to fly to a destination and the business people who own the airline want to invest in doing so, there shouldn't be any talk about reciprocal arrangements for this country or air traffic rights. You know, we really do need true open skies on a global basis. We've seen the same thing with visas. And I recall years ago, we, as an industry, approached the government of Dubai through His Highness Sheikh Mohammed to say that, listen, it would be a good idea if you stop talking about reciprocity in terms of visas, and since we want to develop tourism, allow open visas, visas on arrival. So he took immediately 32 countries that were not perceived to be an immigration threat or anything like that to the United Arab Emirates and agreed to introduce on a non-reciprocal basis visa waiver. Nowadays, the UAE passport is now, I think, one of the 7th most powerful passports in the world, because so many other countries have opened up to United Arab Emirates citizens and allowed them to travel visa-free to their countries. So it will come eventually. And I think it's this kind of attitude that Dubai has had in starting the airline. Okay, the American airlines say that the airlines of the Gulf are totally subsidized by the government. Actually, the Emirates Airlines contributes to its shareholder, which is the government, on an annual basis. And since the very first injection of only $10 million cash by the government of Dubai, the Emirates Airlines has been self-sufficient, but manages to compete as one of the top airlines of the world. And indeed now we get 18 million visitors a year into the state of Dubai, which is only one part of the United Arab Emirates. We have Ras Al Khaimah, which is developing very quickly. We have Abu Dhabi, and indeed the other 5 states within the United Arab Emirates, or 4 states within the UAE, that continue to understand that tourism is a business, tourism is an investment. And that's something that I think is so important for all of us, that we should be looking within the industry when we try to attract investment. How do we give a return on investment to our stakeholders? And stakeholders, of course, as Dr. Taliban said already, is not just the owners of the business, it's all the people as well who work within the business, which I think has been something that's so important and so beneficial for our industry when we try to get investors to say, yes, we provide employment for young people. Yes, we see so many young people who can rise to the top within our industry in a very good time. And we have to continue to look at the situation as, how are we with regards to sustainability, with environmental sustainability? Do we still give plastic bottles of water in the bedrooms? If so, why? Why can't we say the water from the tap is absolutely safe, we guarantee you can drink it, and we give glass bottles, but remember that glass bottles also use energy to be made, so it's not quite that simple. And just as a quick aside, we had this situation in Dubai where people were saying that, we must stop importing water. And I said, well, hang on, in a place like Dubai, 99% of the water is desalinated. So is it better that we import the water from France, where it comes down the mountain into the bottles, we're told, without touching anything else? It probably does make sense, actually, for us to import water. We recently had the Minister of Agriculture for Ireland who came on a business trip to the United Arab Emirates. And he talked about how Ireland exports 10% of all the food it produces, and the United Arab Emirates actually imports 90% of all the food it consumes. So therefore, the populations are about similar. Isn't that a great market for Irish budgets? We can take everything if we want to. So yes, I think that within the industry generally, we have to make sure that we are there with the business case. We are an attractive investment because we tick all the boxes. We give employment for young people, we give sustainable employment, and we give, most importantly, I think, ultimately, to make sure that it is sustainable in the long term, we give a return on investment that makes sense to an investor coming into a country. And I think the United Arab Emirates has shown that over the years. Yes, it has continuously reinvented itself, but it is the private sector within the United Arab Emirates that has actually been the leader in developing all of these hotels, including the government as an owner as well, but as a business, because Dubai very much is run almost as a business, but it has succeeded in that regard.
Indeed. Well, Dubai has always been Dubai Incorporated. And I think what's really important, what you were saying, was that it is getting that state level understanding and then having the conversation quantitatively as well as qualitatively.
And like Malta, with 35% almost of GDP is contributed directly and indirectly from tourism.
Absolutely, brilliant. Thank you very much. And importantly, I think as well, that if we look at one of the greatest blessings for our industry, ironically, it was the 2008-2009 downturn, because that's when we stopped talking about tourism as the tourists and started talking about it as jobs, as revenues, as investment opportunity, and we had to make the business case outside of tourism. But part of any good investment is very much making sure that we have the insurance policies around it to protect that investment. And Honourable Minister Bartlett, I'd like to shift to you because you've been looking very much as a region very dependent on tourism, on creating an approach to putting an insurance policy around it through, as you call it, resilience. How have you been able to sell that case to attract investment to the concept of a resilience centre? Please.
Thank you very much, Anita, and I share the views of my panelists on the direction and this real quality of the discourse that we've had here this evening. This has been really game changer in terms of the discourses that we now must have to make tourism truly an instrument of inclusive growth, underscoring the word inclusive, to the point of enabling this management structure that causes tourism to be not just a social activity, but also an activity that develops capacity in people and in countries to do better, to add value, to be able to withstand disruptions. Because the global reality is that we are vulnerable to disruptions, various types of disruptions. There's the seismic disruptions, we know that story very well, which spreads out into tsunamis and earthquakes, and we have volcanoes. And when these things happen, they not only disrupt the flow of economic activities, but they devastate countries and lives. And then there's pandemics and epidemics. And there's cybercrime, which is a more recent phenomenon, and terrorism, and political, geopolitical disruptions. Isabella and I know a little bit about that from all parts of the world. And these are elements that have caused what tourism means to dependent countries such as the Caribbean and many others of us. 79 of us, 79 countries of the world today have tourism dependence on GDP of 10% and more. And just to position ourselves in the Caribbean, for example, of that 79, we have the top 13. But there's a phenomenon about this which we must take note of, is that these 79 countries, by and large, are characterized by high unemployment, high debt to GDP ratio, high crime. So when we look at the fact that last year, $800 billion of investment went into tourism, and the projection is that by 2028, 1.3 trillion investment will go into tourism. Where is that investment going? So there's a whole asymmetry here as to how do we balance the reality that the most tourism dependent countries are the poorest. So we then have to look at how do we reposition the investment. And we need to focus the investment now on building people and building capacity. Building a capacity of people to get added value and to be able to overcome these vulnerabilities, to manage the disruptions when they appear and they arrive, and then to build better and to do more. So we have established this Resilience Center in the Caribbean for exactly that purpose, to enable the development of information and ideas, best practices, and to bring resources, capital resources also, into creating this insurance to protect vulnerables from disruptions that will come, that will enable total devastation. I close with giving you one example of how critical this kind of insurance is for small, vulnerable states. Last year in the Caribbean, we had 2 hurricanes, the intensity of which we've never seen before in more than 100 years. And the impact was that one country, Barbuda, was totally destroyed. It's now simply a rock in the middle of the Caribbean Sea. No vegetation, no human habitation. The second was Dominica, another small island that lost 226% of its GDP. And the third was Puerto Rico, which is part of the great United States, the richest economy in the world. But they lost nearly 60% of their GDP in the process. How do these countries recover? How do they manage the process? But more importantly, how do they build back so that they now not only are able to survive, but they are able to thrive? And that's the essence of what our investment must be directed at. Must be building capacity to survive, but more to thrive.
Brilliant, thank you very much. So, based on that thought, so we have an understanding of the business case of tourism. We understand why investment is required. We have examples of how the need for constant innovation and ideation is important to building destinations and keeping them as a viable source of tourism, not just GDP, but jobs, and making sure people feel secure in their lives. And now we move to the Truth Commission. And I'm going to ask our dear friend from Zanzibar, because you're on the front line. You're a businessman. And one of the challenges is that you have in front of you, I was going to say 4 political leaders, but you're 3.5, Gerald. So I'm going to give you half of you as political. You've got
I know I'm the former this and the former that.
We've got 4 leaders who are committed to making tourism a viable investment. But as we know in government, leaders change. How do you as a business person find a way of gaining confidence in investing in governments through tourism, with a confidence that whatever the person is on the card, the spirit of their commitment to tourism is going to go unchanged? Please.
Thank you very much, Anita. It's never easy to be prepared for the changes in the governments. And in countries like Kenya, where they have Honorable Balalo over here, who I'm a very big fan of, and he's well aware, they're very lucky. And if Kenyatta was to go and Balalo was going to change, there would be changes there. Now, how do those companies in Kenya protect themselves with those changes? The approach that I have done in Zanzibar is to lead from behind. So we went into these villages where we're surrounded with 1,000 people in that community where we bring our development. And in all of the negotiation process with the government, I went to the people, I explained to them what I want to do in that area. And once they accepted it, they became my forefront. So if there are any changes that's ever going to happen, you have 1,000 villagers that are going to come and talk to you, the government. So I am behind, represented by my own people from the village. And in tourism, when we talk about the businesses that are going to be born out from the investment that we bring into those areas, is I am myself a product of tourism that came to Zanzibar. My first job was a tour operator at the age of 17. And today I'm sitting here with very important people. And
As are they.
And these are the things that we're going to go into those villages and help them by building them, helping them build businesses. But most of all is the first thing we need to invest in is education. Without education, we will always struggle. And this is what the fight that we're always having with the government, is to try and help those communities, to uplift them. We have a few CSR programs that we do in the community. And we find that if we can find people that can read and write, we can train them to do a lot. But what do? We do those ones that can't read and write. And we try and take programs teaching them tailoring. Once they have tailoring, where they're going to get the jobs from? So we have to create businesses for them For example, we did a pilot program with some ladies in the village, and we took them through this tailoring program. Once they completed, we had to set up a business for them, and then we found one villager who we trained her to do their marketing, who can get the businesses out of the hotels and do their uniforms. Thank you very much.
But that's a lovely point, excuse me, that you're developing a supply chain for the tourism investment itself that allows everyone to get involved as someone who believes there's value to that, which I think is a really important part. And I must say, you and I had the conversation, I'm gonna give you 120 seconds. Please can you share with everyone here a little bit about your business, because it really is quite an unsung hero, particularly in the servant leader approach that you take, please.
We are developing a project called Blue Amber in Zanzibar, which is one of the biggest tourist resorts in Africa. Once completed, it will have a golf course designed by Ernie Els, 5 5-star hotels, and around 3,000 villas. Some people ask, where is this market going to come from? Well, Zanzibar has been growing at the rate of 22 to 24% in tourism. Currently, we're receiving this year, we're going to record 400,000 tourists. The government plans to have up to 1 million tourists, but there are no rooms to accommodate that. So the 5 hotels that we're going to be building will automatically be filled up. Now, the villa market, the researches and the studies that we have done have showed that the markets are in the Middle East, in Africa, and the European. So it's, and we also have a duty-free license, so it's going to be one of the first resorts with duty-free license in Africa.
Brilliant, thank you very much. As we all know, one of the most critical elements of investment is the resource of time, which of course we never have enough of. And what we wanted to do with this panel was to give you a sense of what the conference is going to be all about. This is simply an appetizer. So with that in mind, you've had a sense of the chemistry that the conference wants to unfold, but I would like to throw a trick question to all of my speakers, please. You've all invested your time, your names, your equity into this conference already by being here today at the launch event. Can you please, in under 30 seconds, explain to me what is your expectation of ITIC? What is going to make it different? Honorable Minister Bartlett, 30 seconds.
Firstly, I like the line of this conversation because it's attempting to look at tourism investment as a people-directed activity. And if we build the people, then we secure the future of the destinations. So closing in 30 seconds, I tell you, it's about changing the conversation from the demand side investment to the supply side investment, because that's where the people are.
Brilliant, thank you very much. And I have to say, watching Gerald's response, he had you really must never play poker, sir. Because you had this look on your face of, he took mine. Sir.
Well, talking about people and building on that, I just want to give a very quick example. I'm an ambassador for an organization called the Academy of Culinary Art of Cambodia, which has been established by a Swiss charity where they've built a school to teach young Cambodians how to be chefs. The Swiss gentleman in charge, Pierre Thami, comes to visit me in Dubai. I introduce him to different hoteliers in Dubai. He has now secured about 30 internship places for his students to go to work in Dubai. A win-win. We train these people internationally. They can go back to Cambodia and really help Cambodia to develop its nascent tourism industry, which is growing at a great rate. At the same time, it helps Dubai to continue to develop its tourism industry and its hotel industry by having these very well-trained young chefs coming into Cambodia. So it's very much coming to Dubai. It's very much a people thing, which is really helping, and it's also profitable for all concerned. So it's win-win-win.
That's brilliant, because it redefines the assets as the human capital, not just the financial capital. Madam, please.
I do believe that ITIC will create this space where people from diverse sectors, obviously with a focus also on, in particular, focusing on tourism, will connect to share experience and ideas and to think mainly outside the box. Because we need to think outside the box, even though we do have a roadmap for sustainable development, including tourism, but we still need to think outside the box to have the proper business model that is effective enough. There are already models that we can look at and really assess, and also maybe measure tools, measure outcomes. And I think this is what ITIC will stand for: bringing people together, creating the synergies that we need across regions and across the world.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Honourable Minister Bilal.
Thank you very much, Anita. Two things I bring myself to this table. One is a think tank. ITIC first needs to think differently in tourism, changing or reinventing what tourism means. Before it was just about jobs, and probably tourism is destructive because it's a consumer element. So we have to rethink, and that's why I'm glad to sit next to this wise man, Dr. Talib Rifai, to get the experience and the knowledge of how do we rethink tourism. That's number one. Number two, how do we create investment? Not for the sake of building hotels, but for the sake of building people. And that is critical. The minute you build communities, you start now building investments and returns of investments. That's why I bring myself to this group, because I see two good things: a think tank that thinks differently about tourism, and then we build people and not build bricks and mortars. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Please.
Thanks. I would see it as an opportunity for us to come together and learn. I mean, sitting here today and listening to other ideas from other countries such as Jamaica, Kenya, Malta, listening to the minister here was amazing, and which I want to pick those ideas and take them back. So I see it as a learning opportunity to put people together that we can take back and make changes in our country.
Brilliant, thank you. Which is lovely, because suddenly the International Tourism Investment Conference has become an international tourism investment conversation in community development as well. Ladies and gentlemen, I think we can all say that we have been witnesses to the brief being defined for this conference for Dr. Rifai and Ibrahim in terms of what the expectations are for next year. Please may I ask you, as I ask them all, to hold tight and sit in their seats, to give a very warm round of applause to our panelists. Thank you very much. Before I hand over the stage to Ibrahim, we have a couple of little special injections into the program before we actually go across and have a little bit of a drink and a bite. And first, before I do so, I'd like to do effectively the introduction of a logo that should be rather new to this backdrop that many of you have not seen before. May I please ask to come to the stage? I do believe the honors are going to be done by, sorry, this is an ever-changing program. The logo is going to be done by Ibrahim. It is our dear friend sitting beside you, if I recall correctly. Excellent. Over to you.
Thank you, Anita. I must say that's been very inspiring listening to all of you tonight. And thank you so much, Your Excellency, for being with us tonight, and also to the ministers. So, Your Excellency, Mrs. Marie-Louise Kolevo-Preca, President of Malta, Ministers, Honorable Najib Balala, Cabinet Secretary, Ministry of Tourism and Wildlife, Kenya, Honorable Edward Bartlett, Minister of Tourism, Jamaica, Honorable Conrad Mizi, Minister of Tourism of Malta, Dr. Talib Rifai, Chairperson of ITIC Advisory Board, members of the Diplomatic Corps, members of ITIC Advisory Board, distinguished guests, members of the press, ladies and gentlemen. So we've been talking about ITIC. It's a flavor of what we are going to do for next year. So we are talking about tourism investment platform. So tonight we want to reveal that logo that is going to be for next year, about what we're going to talk. So it's about Invest Tourism. So we'll have the logo here. So we were talking with Dr. Rifai about how you're talking about invest tourism, how we link investment and tourism. So we were talking about the technicalities, the graphic of it, you know, merging the T with invest and tourism. And then the humor of it was we trying to get a T, and then Dr. Taleb says, you know, there's the first aspect of it is talent. You know, so which is really great. It's quite amazing. And this is showing all the connectivity between invest, tourism, and talent. You know, so ITIC as an umbrella body has two distinct roles. Think Tourism 360 is a think tank of ITIC, and it comprises high caliber professional invest tourism. Is a tourism investment facilitator. The main aim and objective of this tourism investment platform is to connect viable tourism projects to investors, private equity firms, VCs, law firms, family officers. Invest Tourism will therefore act as a bridge for investors to be linked to live and bankable projects in Africa, island economies, and other parts of the world that are in need of capital investment. Our ultimate objective is to stimulate investment in projects that can stand out as a true model of development that puts people first, promotes self-employment and self-reliance. This is basically what Invest Tourism will cater for. It is designed to bridge a gap in the tourism investment funding process, and it will oil the mechanism for countries and private entities to meet and transform tourism policies into realities, project into concrete and profitable business ventures. Our mission is to facilitate investment in tourism and empower people. Our vision is for investment in tourism to benefit people across the world. Invest Tourism will therefore promote a noble cause for ITIC by building synergies for the common good, for the prosperity of people and peace in the world. So we are trying to bring peace, tourism for peace, sustainability. So that's the cause that what ITIC will cater for. I thank you for your attention.
Ibrahim, thank you very much. Excellent. Ladies and gentlemen, we're at the final announcement for this evening, and we can't let you leave without one more acronym. We've got one more acronym for you. Behind that is a very important strategic partnership that's about to take place, because exactly as what was said, as Madam, you spoke about synergies, we spoke about partnerships and making connections. And importantly, the tourism community has no geographic boundaries. So for that purpose, I would like to introduce and welcome to the stage our very dear friend who's coming from the MTF, the Mediterranean Tourism Foundation. Please may I ask Andrew Muscat to come to the stage. Dr. Rifai, may I also ask you to come back on stage. And Ibrahim, as we're going to have a very special announcement about the partnership between MTF and, dare I say, Honourable Minister Bartlett, the GCR. Please.
I think the players that you see here on stage now have made a very important decision that they cannot do it alone. They want to extend arms, they want to discover synergies, as the President said. I'm very, very honored and very privileged and very happy to announce the synergy, the partnership between the Global Resilience Tourism Center of Jamaica, the Mediterranean Tourism Foundation of Malta, and the ICIT of Mauritius, London, whatever you want to call it, global. It's very important for us to work together. And thank you very, very much. I don't want to speak anymore. I think you understand what I'm talking about. We have one more year. In November 2019, we'll be holding the real conference. It's just a warm-up for the conference. But between now and then, I'm calling on each and every one of you, representing whichever initiatives, to come to us. Let's talk to each other. Let's build more synergies together between now and next year. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you. I have to crave your indulgence for this 1 minute to indicate that the Global Tourism Resilience and Crisis Management Center will also have an observatory connected with it. The full purpose of which, of course, is to develop one center in the world that is a repository of global information and communication capabilities to connect with countries in real time, indeed in nanotime, as disruptions take place. We will have our first board meeting on Sunday at the Chesterfield Hotel here in London at 10 o'clock through to 2. And after that, we will have the global launch in Jamaica on January 31st. We are proud that we're building synergies across the world to enable partnerships, not just for an institutional capacity building, but also for the spread of information, key critical information, and the use of best practices from different areas. We are not intending to be a center on our own. We are going to be a center that embraces and includes existing partners, people who have done well, and we want to create the synergies to do better. Because that's the final and most critical point of all. We are about adding value, doing more, and doing it to thrive, not just to survive. Finally, I want to thank Her Excellency, and I'd love to ask her to just join us because I think her position as the honorary co-chair for the center brings not only great prestige and value to it, but it certainly gives the international perspective that we intend for the center to have. And we're going to ask her to just join us in this synergy because she's a patron also for the Mediterranean. And we will thank her very much. She will serve with the Prime Minister of Jamaica, the Most Honorable Andrew Holness, as the co-chair for the Americas. And we're going to seek a co-chair for Africa, a co-chair for Asia, and of course, a co-chair for Oceania. And that will bring a team of powerful co-chairs that will give the advisory and what I call the supernumerary support. Where in politics we call it the men in gray suits. So this will be the team in gray suits that will oversee the activities of the center. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The Mediterranean Tourism Foundation, the vision is to promote tourism as a vehicle for peace and stability across the Mediterranean region. Very much action-oriented, a project which has been conceived through the island of Malta, which earlier on Dr. Rifai referred, because now we consider him as part of our Maltese family, to as the Rock. We refer to our country many times between us as the Rock. A rock, however, which we have a vision to turn into a stepping stone by bringing together all the different parties working towards achieving the aim that we have set for our foundation. So concretely, I'm very proud to share with you the decision that we've taken at the Board of Governors level, that we'd like to become a satellite of the Resilience Center for the Mediterranean, for the Mediterranean region, and also a satellite for the Tourism Invest in the Mediterranean region, and concretely have the first conferences, the first satellite conferences as part of our Mediterranean Tourism Forum set for the 14th and 15th of February. I look forward to our guests for the conference. Thank you so much.
Valentine.
For Valentine, of course.
And my anniversary, remember?
Okay. I think a lot have been said tonight. So my only message to say about this partnership is to declare this partnership live now. It is open, so it is a great partnership synergy between ITIC, the Global Resilience Center, and the Mediterranean Tourism Foundation. So, and thank you, Dr. Rifai, for bringing us together.
Members of the board of the ITIC to come and join us here for a picture, please. Minister, join us too. You're a member of our board as well. Please.
Okay.
Look this way now.
Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, with that, we now welcome you, please, to a cocktail next door, and we look forward to seeing you at the conference next year. Have a very strong WTM. God bless and safe travels.
Well done. Thank you so much.
And you're studying progress? Exeter, okay. Well, my background is really, I didn't know that. But then, well, you must have better protection. I can say. And which I really order your success in your studies.
So much about my
But your grandfather is such a wise man. And really do what he can inspire so many
Pleasure meeting you. Oh, yes, yes, of course. I remember that. Social economic. Enjoyed it? People that must be balanced. So definitely have a Hi Dave, you came here from the beginning?
Yes, I arrived just as it started, lots of things happened. I was sitting here